Okay, I'm going to start us. It is 1:02. Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. We have seen recently an increase in interest based on news coverage of yesterday's public meetings, and we're so glad you made time to join us today, this afternoon, for our last public meeting in this current series. I am Jasmine Chan. I am the program manager, or a program manager rather, in the city manager's office, here to support a respectful and productive community discussion around accessory dwelling units. Thank you for having me, and thank you for being here. I'd like to start us off by going over the purpose of today's meeting. So first, to create a shared understanding of the ADU project, purpose, and process. 2, to discover and share participants' viewpoints, learn each other's perspectives. And 3, to begin to identify community goals and concerns related to accessory dwelling units. So a few notes, I guess, before we get into the agenda for the meeting. We are going to try our best to stick to that 1 hour mark, but we may go over by about 10 minutes as we hear report backs from the discussion sessions. Another item to note is that there is no chat option in this Zoom room. We did that to ensure that there's only one conversation happening at a time. That being said, we know it's not a whole lot of time for us to hear all of your questions and concerns and your comments. So we will be sending out an email with a link to a comment form that you can fill out after today's meeting. And any questions you have that come up during Corin's presentation or the stakeholder group's presentation, please hold those and ask those in your breakout session. Next slide. We are going to just walk you quickly through the agenda. So welcome and meeting over here, that's right now. The background, we'll get a background presentation. So we'll discuss what are accessory dwelling units, how are they currently regulated. And then we'll hear from Shreya and Colby on the stakeholder group that the mayor and council established. So they'll update us on their progress so far, their priorities, and issues that they've been considering. Then we'll go into the bulk of the meeting, which is feedback and discussion. We want to have 30 minutes for that, to spend a lot of time hearing about your thoughts, your perspectives about benefits and concerns and potential solutions as it relates to accessory dwelling units. Then we'll do a report back and then a wrap up, and then we'll be off to the rest of our day. So to share a bit about the background for this code change and an overview of accessory dwelling units, I would like to introduce Corin Manning, Planning Administrator with the Department of Planning and Development Services.
Thank you, Jasmine, and thank you everyone for being here today. It's great to see so much interest in this conversation. So I want to start off by just going over what an accessory dwelling unit is, explain this term a little bit, and then get into a little bit of the background of why we're looking at this tool in Tucson and how they're regulated today and some options as we move forward. So an accessory dwelling unit is an independent housing unit that has its own kitchen, bathroom, living, and sleeping space. And I've emphasized the kitchen because that's really a key aspect of how we define accessory dwelling units and how we differentiate them from other types of accessory spaces that are already permitted in the city. So for example, we sometimes see guest houses or sleeping quarters on a property today. Those do not have a full kitchen, typically do not have a full kitchen, as that kitchen is really what makes that a separate dwelling unit, because it means it can be inhabited by another household. So these units, accessory dwelling units, are typically under 1,000 square feet, and they are accessory to a primary residence, sharing a lot with the primary residence. There's a lot of other terms that people use for these units. So you may have heard these referred to as casitas, mother-in-law units, granny flats, backyard cottage, carriage house. These are all terms that can be used to refer to these types of accessory dwelling units. One term that I did not put on here is tiny house. And I want to mention that because that can mean a lot of different things to different people. So we stay away from that term because it can also often be used to refer to a tiny house on wheels. And that's really not what this project is trying to address. Homes on wheels, or units on wheels are not actually considered dwelling units in Tucson. Those are mobile homes or really their vehicles. So that's not the purpose of this code change. There's a lot of different types of accessory dwelling units. They can be detached from the main structure. That's kind of the classic example of a backyard cottage that is separate from the main unit. They can be attached as an addition to a home, or they can be interior to the main home. That could be an attic or basement. Probably not as common in Tucson to see that, but we do see a lot of garages that have been converted or carports that have been converted to a living area. So those are some images of some different types in a graphic, but let's look at a few photos to get a sense of what these look like, because we do see these casitas already in Tucson. There are some types of lots and areas of the city where they are permitted. So let's take a look at what these look like. So here's an example. This is an alley view. So this casita is accessed either from the alley, which is a nice private entrance. There's also a little parking area there, or it can be accessed from an interior courtyard by going through the main living area. Here's an interior shot. One thing about these types of casitas is they often make very efficient and creative use of the interior space, as they're usually pretty small spaces. 400 or 500 square feet is very common for a casita. So you can see here the sleeping area is divided from the kitchen by an interior wall. Here's another view with a very similar setup. This is an attached guest house that's been attached to the main house. In this case, the sleeping area is separated from the living area just by some furniture. A large bookcase serves that purpose. Another example, this is a detached guest house that's detached from the main unit. You can see it has a living area and a bedroom, and it's accessed through this interior courtyard and walkway. So those are a few examples. Why are we talking about accessory dwelling units in Tucson? Accessory dwelling units are one way to support a lot of existing community priorities that we hear from our community members and have been reinforced by our mayor and council. One of those is our need for affordable housing. We have a lot of data that shows that there is a very high need for more affordable housing in Tucson. More than half of the renters in our community are cost burdened, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on housing costs. As well, there's a particular need for more housing options for seniors. Our senior population is growing in Tucson, and many want to age in place. They want to have caregivers nearby or reside with family members in a multi-generational household. Accessory dwelling units are one way to support that. As well, climate action and resiliency is a major goal for our community. Mayor and council declared a climate emergency in September of last year. And accessory dwelling units are one way to promote infill development that makes more efficient use of our existing infrastructure and also tend to be very energy efficient new construction. So why are we talking about this now in particular? Well, the past year during the COVID-19 pandemic has really underscored all of these existing needs in our community. We've heard from a lot of families who would prefer to have an elderly relative living in an accessory dwelling unit rather than in a nursing home. We also hear from families who are doubling up out of economic need or just in order to support each other in terms of caregiving needs during these very challenging times. So accessory dwelling units are one tool that we are pursuing to help address our needs for affordable housing and senior housing and climate resiliency. However, as a city, we're pursuing a range of strategies in order to address all of these issues. These are very complex issues that our city is grappling with, and there's no one solution. However, accessory dwelling units are one tool that we can look at to help us deal with some of these challenges as a community. We have seen that across the country, a lot of other cities have allowed accessory dwelling units in order to address these same issues of housing affordability, infill and climate adaptation. And in some cases, entire states have legalized accessory dwelling units. Some of the aspects that are regulated are the number of units, the size, parking, and other aspects. And in some places, they've even taken further steps of creating model plans that are available for use by community members. So it's a tool that's been used elsewhere. What about the picture in Tucson? So currently, accessory dwelling units are not a defined term in our zoning code, which is also known as the Unified Development Code. And in fact, the standards for accessory buildings and structures specifically state that an accessory building shall not be a dwelling unit, meaning it cannot have a full kitchen to be that self-enclosed living space. In some cases, a second unit is permitted on some large lots in certain zoning districts. However, the density limits and other regulations in most of our residential zoning districts restrict where ADUs can be built to just a few areas of our city. So it's not widely available right now as a tool for most homeowners. For that reason, Mayor and Council requested that staff work with our community to develop a proposal for how to enable accessory dwelling units to be used in Tucson, built in, developed in our city. So we're looking to develop a code amendment that defines accessory dwelling units as an allowed use, specifies where they are allowed, and starts to develop use-specific standards for these units. Some of those standards will cover areas such as the type of ADU that's permitted, the size of the accessory dwelling units, lot size requirements, standards around the height, lot coverage, setbacks, things like that, and then parking requirements. And we're also looking at potential occupancy requirements. I want to be clear about a couple things that this code amendment would not do. It will not alter any of our existing regulations around group dwellings, which are regulations that restrict the number of unrelated people in a structure or that can live on a lot. It also would not change any of our regulations regarding mobile homes. So again, this is not about permitting tiny homes on wheels. Again, those would be considered vehicles and not dwelling units. It would not change the existing design guidelines of a historic preservation zone or neighborhood preservation zone. This also would not override any HOA regulations. So in some cases, the CC&Rs of HOAs restrict this type of development. It also would not change any of our building or fire code requirements for safe, high quality housing. This would need to meet the same standards as other structures. So this process began in November of last year when Mayor and Council initiated this code amendment. Since then, we've been doing some research and analysis of different types of lots in Tucson to see where this might be possible. We've also established a stakeholder group based on input from Mayor and Council to help advise us on this code amendment. This group includes technical experts such as architects and builders, as well as neighborhood representatives. And you're going to hear from a few members of that group in just a minute. And then the red dots on this timeline is where we are right now. We're just doing our first phase of public engagement with these public meetings that we've been holding over the last 2 days. And this set of meetings is really about listening and learning from our community, hearing your goals and concerns. Based on the feedback that we take in over the course of these meetings, we'll be developing a proposal for a code amendment. And we'll hold another series of public meetings later in March or early April to share a proposal and get additional feedback from the community. After that, a proposal would go through a formal public review process. We will be presenting this to our Commission on Equitable Housing and Development, as well as the Planning Commission, and ultimately to Mayor and Council. So before we hear from the stakeholder group and then move to our breakouts, I wanted to share a couple more visuals to get us thinking about how accessory dwelling units can fit in our existing neighborhoods and lots in Tucson. So this is an aerial of a pretty typical Tucson neighborhood. This is a R1 residential zone. You can see it's all single family residences. Most of these lots are about 7,000 or 8,000 square feet. The R1 residential zone is our most common residential district in Tucson. It covers nearly 20% of our city, far more than any other residential district. In this district, only lots that are 10,000 square feet or more can build a second unit today. Only about 20% of the lots in R1 meet this requirement, which means that in the R1 district, it would be very difficult for most people to build an accessory dwelling unit today. Here's a close-up of one particular lot that you can imagine, kind of in that neighborhood we just looked at. You can see an existing single-family dwelling on this site. This site is about 8,000 square feet. And the shaded area in the middle shows what we call the developable area of this lot. The area that is set back from the property line, meeting all the setback standards, and within that maximum height of 25 feet. So you can see today there is one unit on this site. And then we looked at what would it look like to add an accessory dwelling unit to this site. This is an example showing an 800 square foot accessory dwelling unit located in the backyard of this site. You can see that this ADU fits in within the existing developable area of this site. This site happens to be along an alley, so there's even room for a vehicle access there and potentially a parking space. This is just one scenario that we've looked at. We're looking at a lot of other different types of sites and types of accessory dwelling units to test some of the options as we craft this change to our zoning code. We're working through a lot of these options with our stakeholder group, and they're considering a lot of the various issues and benefits of accessory dwelling units. So now I'd like to introduce Colby and Sharia, who will share a little bit about the conversation that's been happening among that stakeholder group so far.
I guess I'll go first. Hi, everyone. My name is Sharia Jimenez. I'm with Cuadro Design. We do drafting and design services. I've been following this since the beginning and really see the great need in our community for this type of housing. The specific lens that I'm looking at and I'm interested in is equity, and how do we use this as a tool for equitable development, and also to really make sure that the tool stays in the hands of the low to moderate income groups as well as small scale developers. I've been working with a cohort of folks trying to get trained up in becoming local smaller scale developers, providing missing middle housing and those sorts of issues. So we definitely see this as a potential tool to support all of those things. And again, but I think it's going to take some engineering and some creative thinking about how to restrict things in the right way, how to make things flexible, but also, provide protections where they need to be. So it's going to be a tricky one, and we've had a pretty diverse group so far. But the group that I really want to work with and get more involved, which I haven't seen as much involved, is the low to moderate income families, especially. And I've gone after a grant to help support some of that work in the engagement and outreach work, and I hope to pull more of those folks in and those voices in the conversation.
Hi, yes, I agree with what she said, that I think we have a good diverse group of folks that are coming at this from a lot of different angles and perspectives, and so that's really healthy for the conversation and input. And as Corin mentioned, this isn't the solution to fix any of these kind of broader issues, but it's definitely a piece in a tool that we can use amongst the other things that the city can bring to bear. And I like that it addresses kind of a broad range of issues. We have affordability issues in our community. We have the climate change issues, stability in neighborhoods. So it's one way to start to address a number of those issues. So hearing different perspectives, and as Sharia said, that we have to find that balance of how do we kind of allow enough flexibility to incentivize and allow folks to use it, and of all income levels to be able to kind of tap into the resources, but still offer kind of some certainty and stability and protections where there might be concerns. So I feel like we're having those conversations and starting to zero in on how to make that work.
Great, thank you, Colby, and thank you, Sharia, for sharing some of the challenges that you're wrestling with on the stakeholder group. And thanks, Corin, for some background information. The next portion of our meeting is the breakout group discussion. So you will be invited to join a breakout room that will be hosted by a city staff member. They'll serve as your facilitator. The goal of this discussion is to hear each of your responses to the questions shown on the screen. We know everyone's time is very valuable, so we ask for your help that everyone in the breakout rooms be given the opportunity to share their thoughts. Again, any comments that you have that don't get shared in the breakout room, we'll have that email coming out to you with a link to a comment form. You can go ahead and put your comments in there. We should have until about 1:50 to have this conversation, and then we'll be back for our report back. So Dan, are we ready to go on the breakout rooms? Maybe, almost. We're good, okay.
So
Welcome
apologies to our
back.
breakout group, but I did note the concerns of Karen.
Cool. Welcome back. I think we're all back in the main room now. So we're gonna we have 9 groups to get through. And we have 8 minutes until 2. So I'm going to ask that every group's presenter please stick to the top 2 benefits, top 2 areas of concern, and your top 2 potential solutions as you share out to the whole group. So let's start with Allison's group.
Yes, Paige was our nominee, and I'll share my screen very quickly. I was trying to
Okay, so our group talked about just definitely the ability for homeowners to have some kind of supplemental income, but also talked about the ability to have family members move in and be able to keep them on site. So those were definite benefits, and also to be able to transition between family use or supplemental income. And then for maybe negative aspects of it, definitely concerned about parking. I thought was one that I hadn't thought of if you have all these extra units, where's all the parking going to go? So one of the solutions was to require that there could be enough on-site parking for any ADUs added. And then also just making sure that there's some kind of like historic preservation aspect, that it won't negatively impact the character of the neighborhood. And we saw that one of the solutions for that could be having plans be reviewed by a neighborhood association or a city board.
Great. Thank you. We'll move to Peter's group next.
Okay, some of the benefits identified include having accommodations for frequent guests and out-of-town visitors and aging parents to so as to avoid senior care facilities and the costs associated with those. And also just there's several others, but I'll add one more at least. Reducing vehicle trips I thought was a good one. So with the increased density in certain neighborhoods, people can possibly live closer to their places of work or places where they tend to shop or go out to eat, finding the right neighborhood. So, and then concerns included, well, the main thing was short-term rentals, such as Airbnbs and associated parties and noise in the neighborhoods, especially in historic districts. Concerns with possibly group dwellings where people are moving into their own accessory dwelling unit and then renting out the main house for larger groups of people. And it sort of got cut off, but one of the ways to address concerns would be to have a rental property database in neighborhoods, so that you could identify how many of these short-term rentals are popping up, and maybe find a solution to that by keeping track of the of how rental properties are being used.
Policeman.
I'm hearing policing, or is that okay? Now she's mute. Okay, we'll move to, thanks Peter. We'll move to Dan's group next. Top 2 of each.
This is Colby, so I'm going to report out for us. So that we talked about kind of allowing for a mix of housing prices in a given neighborhood, so that adds some affordable renting options, and then kind of multi-generational housing to be able to bring that in. Some of the concerns we talked about were building cost and parking. And I would say kind of the solutions that we talked about around those were kind of template designs that were pre-approved, working with the city to kind of work on code amendments to allow for like prefab materials, different construction elements that may reduce kind of the construction cost, working with utilities around connection fee charges, those kind of things. And then parking is definitely a tricky one. So trying to find that regulatory balance of making sure that parking doesn't overwhelm the neighborhood, but also allows for the density to work if people want to live car light or car free and use transit or bike and walk, that car space doesn't become a disincentive to actually building the housing.
Thank you. Rebecca's group. Hold on. Rebecca, you were muted. I don't know if you're presenting for your group or you have another presenter.
No, Bob Huey is going to present for our group.
I can.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go
I
for
can
it,
do
Bob.
our,
Yep,
sure,
go
our top benefits are benefits to families that have children, as well as to families that have elderly parents. The top two concerns were parking, and perhaps if I can sum this up, because we didn't get a chance to last time, is to exacerbate problems in historic and special neighborhoods or districts that are already having problems with sub-renting, that to make sure that this doesn't make it worse.
Cool.
And that concludes my summation.
Thank you. Maria's group.
Yes, I have Bill who's going to present. I'm going to share my screen. Bill, are you there?
I am. And I kind of made some of my own notes, so hopefully they don't contradict. But top two, I think the benefits that were identified were helps with urban sprawl, helps with affordable housing and housing for family members, especially that came up in our group. The concerns, I think, are the standard neighborhood and next door neighbor kind of issues, including parking, lights, noise, setbacks. Some possible ways to avoid those could be a neighbor approval process, which is already in place for certain types of structures that get set up. Standards where you might actually set things up on a given site. It goes back to those templates that some people have talked about. Maybe a pilot program at first, using existing buildings. Those are ways to mitigate some of those things. And then the second one that came up is enforcement and compliance. We already struggle with enforcing zoning and planning and issues in Tucson. And how do we not further compound that and make sure that what is built in compliance with the final standards? So hopefully I sort of summarized our group well, and if not, I apologize.
No, that's great, Bill. Thank you so much.
And we've got notes from Maria, and we also have recordings. We'll be good. Elisa's group.
So I think Melody was going to report back for our group. I'm pulling up my screen right now. Melody, are you there? And do you want to share your comments, the comments from the group? I don't hear her, so I think I'll just go ahead and cover a couple of the items from our group. So the big ones on benefits were affordability for different people, financial stability, social benefits, and multi-generational housing can provide some benefits like safety for people living alone and younger people going into the workforce and affordability for them. A lot of the concerns we talked about have been mentioned already as far as next door neighbors, things with, you know, code enforcement or buildings built without permits. We talked a bit about reserving affordable housing for the people that actually need it, not letting large corporations or developers kind of take advantage of this kind of system. But most of the concerns had to do with impacts to the neighborhood if there's a lot of rentals and what that can do to the overall character of the area. The ways that we thought those concerns could be addressed were increased code enforcement funding and staffing, ability for neighbors to weigh in on projects, potential subsidies and a certification program.
Great, thank you. Clayton, your group's up next. Oh, Clayton, we can't hear you, even though you're unmuted. No.
Can you hear now?
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. This laptop, you just got to fiddle with it enough. So we heard a lot of the same concerns as some of the other groups. So I just want to point on a couple of things that stood out that might not have been covered. The extended families was definitely a benefit, but one point that was brought up is using previously graded land so that we're not continuing to sprawl out into the natural desert and developing, you know, the undeveloped portions of our community. So I thought that was a benefit that was of note. Some of the concerns were maintaining green space and shaded areas. How do we keep those open spaces and not just completely fill the entire city full of buildings? And also, how do you maintain the character of the neighborhood? That is definitely was one of the important points. Some of the solutions that were suggested, one was requiring that short-term rentals actually require the primary residence to be owner occupied. That way, the owner of the property has more buy-in to the neighborhood, and it has a point of responsibility for that short-term rental that may be in the backyard or on the property. And one of the suggestions was also to reach out to other communities that have already adopted accessory dwelling unit regulations to see what worked and what some of the concern points of their neighborhoods after these rules have been implemented, so that we can learn from other communities.
Great, thank you. Krista, your group is next.
Yeah, and I think Logan kindly agreed to share out for us if he's here.
Yes. For the positives, one of the things that were interesting was rather than with the Broadway high density or these large multifamily units, which are generally out of state or out of town developers, this is a more local scale, keeps the money in the community rather than an extraction model. And then the other one was allowing more people to participate on the community level that we have, like more people in our neighborhoods walking around saying hello, bicycling, walking places together. The concerns we had are a lot about changing neighborhoods. And then one of the concerns we had as well was, how do we try, which this one we didn't find a resolution to, but how is there a way to get these units to actually be affordable and not just hoping for more housing stock, generally lowering the cost of housing with supply and demand, but is there actual programming to get this to actually be some level of affordable? But as for changing neighborhoods, we were saying if we could figure out regulations to keep large scale predatory developers from using this as a tool to, again, just like change our neighborhoods, not the way we want. So.
Cool, thank you, Logan. And last group we have to hear from is Lauren's group.
Thank you. We have Pamela that is going to report for us. Share my screen.
Well, I'll just quickly say, because a lot of these are super repeated, we're all on a lot of the same things. The unpermitted ADUs that are already in place, that's definitely a concern to make sure that those are addressed and that it's done in a progressive, caring way. And definitely our concern is how it would benefit us is about the family up and down the family tree. How do you think could benefit? I got off track there. Okay, definitely about the family. Okay. What was the next one? Concerns, definitely the price gouging, Airbnb, short-term rental, you know, how it's going to come out. It's a wealthy person's game, you know, flipping homes and gentrification. And then solutions. Communication between the community. Definitely loved city-backed financing and low interest and some equity, some workshop training, that kind of thing. That's an incentive for public transit.
Thank you. Thank you all for being quick about that report out. I know there's a lot of good conversation, good ideas that were discussed in your discussion groups. Thank you for your attendance, your participation. I appreciate all of your thoughtful comments and contributions. And the team at PDSD, alongside the stakeholder group, will be working over the next month and change to develop a draft proposal. And we'll be back out to the public for more meetings in the March-April timeframe to be looking at that draft proposal, kind of digging into the details. And with that, we are at 2:07. Thank you so much for spending part of your afternoon with us. We're grateful for your time, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everyone, for
Thanks,
being
everyone.
here.
Bye-bye.
Monica, did you
Hey.
have a question?
Yes, I was wondering, is there any way that you could share your slides in some way, or?
Great question, Monica. And yes, these will be posted online in the next few days, as well as video from the meeting.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Thanks
Thank
for being
you.
here.
Thanks.
I have a quick
wonderful day.
question if it's
Mhm.
not too late.
Yeah.
I thought I heard at the very beginning that this is only possible if your lot is 10,000 square feet or more?
That's the current regulation. That's why we're looking at zoning changes, because that doesn't include most lots in Tucson right now. So it's only a small handful of lots, at least in R1 districts, where a second unit is permitted today.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Hello.
Yes.
I do have a question regarding permits. Will permits be accessible when it comes to accessory dwelling units by chance?
You're saying how would the permitting process work?
Yes.
If this is approved? So if it is approved, they would be permitted. They would have to receive a building permit, just like all construction. Some people have raised the idea of some model plans that would make it easier for people to go through the permitting process. So that's something that we are looking into.
Okay.
They would have to
It's gonna
go
be
through our standard building review. Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone, again for being here.
Thank you.
again.
Just very quickly, for those who had technical issues, I'm not sure if they, one of our participants in our breakout room, we couldn't hear her. I'm not sure she could hear us. If they have something to share, in terms of their opinion, is there a place where they can send an email or still be able to?
We'll send an email. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
we're going to send an email to everyone who attended, actually everyone who attended, but also everyone who registered, even if they didn't attend, with a link to our comment form online. So you'll all be getting that in the next 24 hours, and we invite you to respond with any comments and feedback that you have.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.